A very good evening to you all. Welcome to the Hellenic Center. I'm Maria Komaki, I'm the director of the Hellenic Center, and I'm delighted to be hosting tonight's event in collaboration with the Society of Modern Greek Studies, entitled Travel Writers in Greece from the 1940s to the Present. This will have 3 presentations delivered by our distinguished authors and academics, Peter Barber, Professor Gonda Van Steen, and Dr. David Wills. Tonight we will be looking into how British and American writers have portrayed their travels in Greece. Dr. David Wills will discuss how travel writing about Greece has evolved over recent decades and considers its future. Professor Gonda Van Steen, editor of The Battle for Bodies, Hearts and Minds in Postwar Greece, published by Routledge in 2024, introducing the previously unpublished memoir of American social worker Charles Schermerhorn about his life and work in Thessaloniki between 1946 and 1951. And Peter Barber, author of A Parthenon on Our Roof from 2022, presents his recently published travel memoirs and there's no and. These 3 short presentations will be followed by a roundtable discussion. Now, I would just like to introduce our speakers with a little bit more detail. So, Peter Barber's Life and Marriage in Greece inspired the award-winning A Parthenon on Our Roof, together with its sequels, A Parthenon in Pefki and Musings from a Greek Village, both published in 2023. Professor Gonda Van Steen is the Korais Chair of Modern Greek and Byzantine History, Language and Literature at King's College London. Dr. David Wills has published extensively about travel literature and is the author of The Mirror of Antiquity, 20th Century British Travelers in Greece, published in 2007. So after the event, our pay bar will be open, so you can go there and continue your discussions, but there will be a Q&A as soon as we finish, so there will be time to pose any questions you have to our speakers. I would like to just give you some practicalities. If you hear a fire alarm, you have to make your way out from the entrance where you came from, so this is our main entrance of the building, out of this room and to the right. And I would like to please ask you to put your phones on silent. I always say that there is always a phone that rings. Sometimes, embarrassingly, it might be mine. I have to make sure I put it on silent. And the last thing I would ask you to do is to please join me in a very warm round of applause for our speakers.
Hello everybody. Don't be alarmed if Grace comes up and adjusts the microphone at various times. So welcome everybody to our event discussing travel writing about Greece from around about the 1940s until the present. Our event is with the kind invitation of the director, so thank you very much for the invitation. And as she said, we're organising it with the Society for Modern Greek Studies, of which I happen to be the treasurer, and Professor Van Steen is the secretary. If you'd like to support our work in organising events promoting modern Greek language, literature and history, then please see our website, or indeed the piece of paper that I've left some copies of on the chairs. So as she said, the format for this evening is that the 3 of us are going to give a short presentation about our specialist subjects, if you like, and we're going to have some other questions a bit later on. So I'm going to give the sort of briefest overview in the next few minutes about travel writing in the period in question, which will hopefully open up various questions and avenues as we go along. So despite the efforts of historians and literary scholars like myself really, during the last 20 years or so, travel writing since, say, 1945 or some arbitrary number like that perhaps, but it remains much less celebrated than that of the 18th or 19th centuries. That earlier period, the 18th and 19th centuries, is often admired and quoted and anthologized and various other things due to its descriptions of supposedly picturesque Greek peasants and archaeological sites prior to modern encroachment or thefts of antiquities. But accounts by more recent travellers offer us not merely enjoyment and innovative literary styles, but they're also fascinating because they reflect for us changing political and cultural attitudes towards Greece. So if we go back to the late 1940s and early 1950s, in the aftermath of armed conflict, accounts at that time were offered by the likes of Kevin Andrews and Zan Fielding. A veteran of the Cretan resistance, Zan Fielding revisited familiar locations and comrades in what had now turned into a much more complex Cold War world, as you can imagine. And then as European travel began to normalise, a strand of ancient history-orientated travel accounts, which are quite familiar from the pre-war period as well, begin to re-emerge. Often information-heavy, these are thinly veiled attempts to bring the classical past to life by finding the supposed qualities of the ancient Greeks in the population of the present. And the title of Osbert Lancaster's quite well-known 1947 book might be used to sum up this kind of approach to Greece. Osbert Lancaster called his book Classical Landscape with Figures. So during the later 1950s and 60s, accounts of an extended residency in Greece became common, including those by significant female literary figures like Charmian Clift and Nancy Spain. And I mentioned those two because if you go down the road to a bookshop that I'm not going to mention, just checked it out today, there were new editions by Nancy Spain and Charmian Clift of those classic texts from the 50s and 60s. Tales of generous but eccentric locals, frustratingly intransigent officialdom, the travails of building a house, and allegedly unreliable Greek timekeeping are common themes at that time. Now, Gerald Durrell, of course, produced several memoirs of his residency in pre-war Corfu, which was dedicated to My Family and Other Animals. Beloved by generations of readers, Gerald Durrell's books, produced decades after the events in question, illustrate that travel writing is as constructive as any other type of literature. Upon examination, some of the characters we find in Gerald Durrell's memoirs turn out to be composites. The anecdotes of other members of the family were claimed as the author's own, and timelines were very movable. Now, another author known for his elaborate reworking of both his own experiences and his own texts was Sir Patrick Leigh Fermor. Now, Leigh Fermor exhibited a deep affection for Greece, which he developed during his clandestine operations assisting the resistance against the Axis occupation. This he combined with a unique literary style, which is, you can describe as poetic or overwrought possibly, in which he sought to evoke the complex sights, sounds and smells of the Greek landscape. His contemporary Lawrence Durrell was equally well-travelled and eccentric in his descriptions. At various points, Lawrence Durrell claimed not to produce political work, but neutrality proved to be impossible for someone who took a stint in End of Empire Cyprus as effectively a British official. Now, whilst some have tried to evade politics during their travel writing about Greece, the more honest authors have had to come to terms with being eyewitnesses to controversial British and American involvement during the Greek Civil War, or later on, grappling with navigating response to the brutal colonials regime of 67 to 74. So by the turn of the 20th to 21st century, Greece was familiar to at least two generations of visitors as a mass tourism destination. So in response, during the early 2000s, a spate of authors offered somewhat manufactured and novelty quests as their justification for travelling there and for people to buy their books. This includes exploits like flying a homemade aeroplane over Crete, cycling in the footsteps of Lord Byron, or searching for the Mediterranean's oldest olive tree. Now, with the 2020s has come a heightened awareness of mental health, of course. There's a renewed engagement with and appreciation of Greece's wild places. These can be found even in what we might regard as over-visited islands like Kos, as the contemporary author Jennifer Barclay discovered in a series of treks and books. So this turn to nature, I suppose, reflects the writing of advocates for the well-being of benefits of nature like Robert Macfarlane, But it also renews a long-standing theme that Greece offers visitors a window onto the past, representing a corner of Europe which is less developed. At the same time, though, at the same time, there's the perennial anxiety of the travel writer that their work is contributing to the popularity of visiting Greece and the impact of allegedly destructive tourism. So, just to give one example, in 2021, Gianni Tully Chaplin, not sure I pronounced that correctly, but her diary and the illustrations with it celebrated the diversity of Greece's nature, from sea daffodils to chipmunks, kumquats to kingfishers. But Chaplin also included environmental warnings, such as noting that a sand dune in Corfu, which had been much frequented all those years ago by Gerald Durrell as a boy, was now being eroded by storms and the footfall of tourists. Developments in Greece of now cannot be ignored. In the wake of the 2008 economic crisis, Hilary Sperling observed rural areas actually springing back to life as unemployed city folk return to claim and earn a living from ancestral farmland. Less positively, I suppose, in the Rhodope Hills, Kapka Kasabova stumbled across a hotel full of migrants which was funded by a German government that was anxious to restrict movement of people further into Europe. Above all, though, Greece continues to provide narratives of disaster and ultimately triumph by those British people who've elected to make their home there, usually in rural rather than urban Greece, and a fine exponent of this subgenre, if you will, of travel writing set in Greece is here this evening, Peter Barber, and we'll hear from him in a minute. Before this, I'd like to take you back to the 1950s. The American aid worker Charles Schermerhorn, which Gonda's going to pronounce better than me, was genuinely concerned to help the Greeks. His memoir, as brought to light and ably analysed by Professor Van Steen, was far from straightforward, though. It offers a unique window onto the complexities of a Greece that's being torn apart by foreign invasion, internal division, and Cold War international positioning.
Well, thank you all. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Naya, for hosting us. And thank you to my fellow speakers and David for laying out the landscape of travel writing to Greece so beautifully, really masterfully. He makes the task for me very easy. I will be speaking about an American travel to Greece and a traveler that comes with a different perspective, a traveler that comes in the framework of humanitarian aid schemes. And I've recently turned that memoir that I discovered of the American humanitarian relief worker Charles Schermerhorn, I've turned his memoir into a book publication which became available early in the year. I could call this project 5 years of feeding. He arrives in 1946 without any experience of Greece, let alone knowledge of the language, and he comes with UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration, which, as you well remember, after the Second World War, is not just an American venture. The UK has a role in it, the Russians have a role in it, but the Americans put up most of the money and get to send most of the personnel, among which are actually quite a few women. They employed quite a few women. And actually they employed quite a few social workers, which is a profession we haven't heard much of during the war years or before, let alone in Greece in the late 1940s. So our Charles comes with a social work education, but he's really educated in that mindset of the American New Deal, how to get America out of the slump of the Great Depression, and how also bring in social classes that have been very underrepresented, such as Black America. So a very kind of progressive mindset that is really about democratizing resources. And he comes with that model and somehow naively thinks that can be easily implemented in Greece. So we wish him luck, and he's in for a lot of surprises. First of all, as soon as he arrives in May of 46, they tell him UNRWA is about to disband, so why doesn't he pack his bag and go straight back home? And sure enough, within a year, UNRWA is done. But he likes it. He's intrigued by the people, he's trying hard to learn the language, even though he never quite manages, and he admires the British, who are so much better at it. But then, he rolls from one position into the next, and what was supposed to be a few months becomes 5 years in Greece. We've all seen that happen, right? You go for a year, and before you know it, so it becomes then, through his writing, some sort of a discovery history through American eyes of what are very critical years for Greece. First of all, he arrives before the full blast outbreak of the Civil War. Little does he know, he comes in May, the Civil War starts again, or for real, in October of 46, and by that time he's already brought over his family and 2 small children. So all of a sudden, life in Greece and the crisis it goes through becomes very real, especially because he relocates to northern Greece and they make their home in Thessaloniki. And as an American, he deliberately chooses to live in a residential neighborhood and not in the expat enclave. He is actually quite critical of expats. Both the Brits and the American expats spend way too much time getting drunk, he said. So this is then the sequence of affiliations that he manages to kind of line up for himself. Clearly there is a lot of need for people of kind of a mid-career level and their experience in a Greece that is really undergoing not only civil war but also reconstruction. First with UNRWA money, later on with some pretty serious American dollars. So he affiliates with the Near East Foundation next, and they set up hostels for children. They have a long history in Greece, coming out of the Armenian genocide and the refugees, the Armenians in the orphans in Greece. And then he also rolls into UNICEF, which will be an outcrop of UNRWA disbanding, and eventually affiliates himself with the American Mission of Aid to Greece and the Marshall Plan. We have forgotten just how many different humanitarian aid programs descend on Greece in those last 5 years of the 1940s. It is literally a laboratory of how to do and how to do humanitarian aid, how to work it out with international partners, how to ship provisions. It is a laboratory for the logistics and the theoretical thinking about humanitarian aid. And we've kind of forgotten how central Greece is in that whole picture. He has a keen eye for writing and an even keener eye for photography. So it's not a surprise to us that he befriends the famous Jewish and Hungarian photographer David Seymour, who became quite a personality and who left us these striking images of children and women distraught by the destruction of Europe. He's also the one who made the famous images of Polish children, for instance. So his archive then, and I need to tell you a little bit of the history of the archive in a minute, but what I wanted to say is that his writings are accompanied by some 300 historical pictures, which is huge. I mean, it's a treasure, right? It's a gold mine. Where else are we going to find a detailed description of everything that went on, mainly in northern Greece, at the height of the Civil War, through the eyes of an American who has his eyes not on political and military history, but on social history, and then within that social history, on the fate of children. I mean, it is unusual in so many ways. Here we see children from a northern village being evacuated and being put in the Queen's hostels closer to Athens. And you see these children who've never seen the sea even enter into this big ship for the big trip to Athens. So he is also caught, of course, in these notorious children's movements, the Pedro Mazoma, carried out by the communists as they're retreating over the northern borders. Parental consent is a very discussed, very hotly debated topic, but then also the equivalent movement of the Queen protecting children from the north by also evacuating them out of the battle-torn areas and integrating them into a royalist system. Both sides come with propaganda, no question about it. what he tries to do is keep children in the nearest foundation hostels and make sure that they can spend 3 or 4 months there and recuperate and build up resources for the winter. So his eyes are constantly on food provisions with focus on children. And this is where I learned a lot about powdered milk. I'm not sure if anyone remembers the beauty of powdered milk, but apparently powdered milk and the sugar and the cocoa you put into it is legendary and is still remembered in certain areas of northern Greece. I visited some of the villages to see if these memories are still alive. At some point he becomes a captive of the communists, because he's constantly on the road with an American jeep that keeps breaking down and the roads are filled with landmines. At some point he is caught in a scuffle between the royalist troops and the communists, and he becomes a hostage to the communists for some 24 hours. And he tries to understand both sides, and he already comes with a pretty progressive mindset, being a New Deal person. And he tries to have intellectual conversation with the communist leaders, and he also tries to have intellectual, ideological conversations with the generals on the royalist camps. And all of that feeds into his memoir, together with descriptions of road conditions, nature conditions, agricultural crops, gender relations. There's just a lot there, talking about local corruption, of which there is plenty, but equally critical of the corruption that goes on in the American schemes, because there is a lot of money and resources at stake. Eventually, these shelters that they've set up in Florina and Konitsa need to be evacuated because of the constant attacks of the communists, and then they will retreat further south. This is, as I said, many aid workers are present, including the care program, and this is also the time that humanitarian photography is being invented, if I say. You put children in the picture, children who care for foreign aid packages. This is a very staged picture. And the appeal of children to our imagination and the use of children, unaccompanied children, in fundraising campaigns was again invented at this time. Milk distribution, also shoes distribution. We have forgotten just how important shoes were when you don't have any in the villages of northern Greece. This is a famous picture again by Seymour of shoe distribution in particular villages. And this will strike you. The iconostasis is made of boxes of an American aid. So you can read, not to be sold, salted creamy butter on the iconostasis. And it's a reminder of just how devastated that part of the country was. And our Schermerhorn is not afraid to basically pull all the available resources in to aid local villages, going up to the most remote mountain villages, all the way to Psarades in view of the then Yugoslavian border, making the trek by mule, always accompanied by a guide, typically an Armenian guide, because he comes upon villages that speak Turkish, Slavic, it's all there. And he puts it all down in his memoirs. And then you wonder, what happened to the memoir? So he writes this all down for 5 years and then sticks it in a box, and it sits in San Francisco, where his son inherits it, and it sits there for 70 years. And the son then becomes a little afraid, he's now in his 80s, becomes a little afraid that his children won't care and will just toss it out one day. So I got wind of it and I said, okay, this is not going to happen. So I made my way over to San Francisco, evaluated the material for what it was, and promised I would edit it, and promised I would put the book in his hands before it was going to be too late. And so I did this fairly quickly, but I also made sure that the original documentation and the photographs have been delivered to California State Sacramento Library, the Tsakopoulos collection, so that it's not just me benefiting, but that there is indeed an English language resource out there for people who want to go back to the source and check this all out. And then tomorrow, in case you haven't had enough of my social history stuff, let me just make a little pitch for the play that is related to the historic adoptions from Greece, which is of course my other pet peeve, which is the material, the historical material, the testimonial material has been shaped into a theatre play. It's opening tonight, and it's going on tomorrow at 7 and Saturday at 7 in the Greenwood Theatre of King's College London. Your closest stop is London Bridge, and I can't wait to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's get my tools together. So bear with me a moment, I'm just trying to get sorted out here. Okay. Right, I'm with you. Thank you very much.
Sorry, just a little.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a real pleasure and honour to be invited to speak to you. So we'll get straight off. Love, laughter, and a little bit of chaos. I write about Greece. It doesn't take too much imagination. I just look out of the window from my home in Evia. The unreal blue sky, orange and lemon trees swaying in the breeze, the perfume of mountain herbs invading my senses, and the tinkle of bells from the collars of goats grazing on the hills. I just write about what I see and what I feel. Now, first a confession. I never planned to be a writer. My journey didn't start with a dream to become an author. In fact, it all started with chaos. A construction project. My first book came out of the absolute madness of trying to build a new home in Greece. What should have been a simple, straightforward...
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm just going to put this here. Just to make sure everybody in the back, if that's all right.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Okay.
Hello, 1, 2, 3? Okay. Right. Sorry, I've my place. It should have been a simple, straightforward project, giving an architect our old home in Glyfada to demolish it and build a new apartment block. In Greece, when you own a property in a valuable area, you can make a deal with a developer who will take full responsibility for building a block. But for his fee, he keeps half of the completed building. Well, that was the plan. It turned into a full-blown Greek odyssey of bureaucracy, misunderstandings, and a lot of coffee-fueled late nights. I found myself knee-deep in blueprints, trying to save our share of the building from a greedy architect who seemed hell-bent on claiming most of it for himself. But my wife, Alex, had her own way of dealing with the problem. She just embarked on a one-woman project to murder him. One time was when the building was at the skeleton stage. It was just a series of concrete beams with a staircase snaking up in the middle into the sky. Alex was standing at the top with the developer, perched on the exposed landing, measuring no more than 2 meters square. The architect had decided to claim the top floor as his and give us our apartment on the lower floors. Alex disagreed, and a full-blown argument could be heard all around Glyfada as Alex poked him in the chest as he retreated backwards towards the sheer drop. And every word emphasised with a new poke, poke, poke in the chest. Alex obviously won, and the developer survived, and we got our penthouse. There were times where it felt like I'd taken on too much and felt unqualified and out of my depth, and that's when the idea of my first book hit me. If I'm going through this much drama just to build a place to live, why not combine it with my introduction to Greek life and tell our story? So, I sat down, started writing, and little did I know it would become a bestseller and the start of my writing career. But let me back up a little bit, because my connection to Greece didn't start with construction woes. It started with a girl, an incredible Greek girl, Alex to be precise. There she is. I was just a starry-eyed teenager, completely smitten by a vision that passed by every morning on her way to school. Who would have thought that a 15-year-old's crush could lead to a lifelong adventure worthy of its own epic? But before I dive into that, let me tell you a little secret. I've always had a love for Greece. Long before I ever set foot there. As a kid, I was obsessed with the Greek mythology. I spent hours watching movies about Greek heroes, Hercules flexing his muscles as he fought monsters, or Odysseus, the wise king of Ithaca, navigating the seas and getting lost after angering the wrong god. I was completely mesmerised by those epic tales, imagining myself as one of those heroes, sailing through those impossibly blue waters. Little did I know, those early fascinations would lay the groundwork for my very real adventure with Greece. Fast forward a few years, and though I hadn't found a Greek princess to rescue, one did rescue me. After losing touch with Alex as a teenager and reconnecting with her 20 years later, I made a decision that changed my life. I packed my bags, moved to Greece, and married my very own Greek goddess. Alex's incredible energy, love of life, and playful spirit took me on a roller coaster ride from day one. Now, most roller coasters leave you feeling dizzy and clutching your stomach. But this one, it gave me a lifetime of stories and, yes, more than a few books to write. Being with Alex now for over 25 years, you would expect I was a fluent Greek speaker. But my early lessons did not go well. Alex decided to teach me the version that can't be found in any phrase books. Coming from a seafaring family, her language can only be described as salty. Her mother would tell me, "Peteraki, when she opens her mouth, her words are diamonds and pearls. Do not repeat them." So the Greek I learned would be well placed in a shipyard in Piraeus, but not for polite company. But my books aren't just about Greece being beautiful. Yes, Greece is breathtaking. Its stunning landscapes, its ancient ruins, its rich history, the sea stretching endlessly into the horizon. But my books are about something deeper. They're about love and companionship. They're about the messy, wonderful, and sometimes chaotic reality of building a life together in Greece. They're about navigating cultural differences, battling red tape, and finding joy in those small victories along the way. My books tell the story of a British guy completely out of his depth, trying to build a home and a new life and a new culture. They also tell the story of a couple, no matter what life throws at them, always manage to smile and fight again. But none of this would have been possible without the love and support of my Greek family, especially my mother-in-law Debbie. Let me tell you, winning her over was not easy, and you could blame her. Here I was, a foreigner with cultural differences as wide as the Aegean Sea, trying to convince her that I was worthy of her daughter. But slowly, year by year, I earned her trust. She saw how Alex and I worked side by side, literally building our life together, brick by brick. And eventually, she realised her daughter was safe with me. I like to think that was my ultimate gift to Debbie, and it's a legacy that lives on in every page I've written. Now, I won't pretend it's all been smooth sailing. Greece, for all its beauty, has a way of testing you. There's a certain charm in the chaos here, a way the country keeps you on your toes. Sometimes it feels like complete freedom, like you're living in a dream. Other times it feels like utter madness. And honestly, with very little structure, or let's be real, a lot of bureaucracy, I sometimes wonder if we all just drift off the edge of the map. But it's a very balance between freedom and order, between chaos and calm that shaped my experience of Greece, and ultimately my books. What I've come to learn is that life here is much like a good story. It's about finding the beauty in the struggles, joy in the small things, and peace in knowing that no matter what happens, you're exactly where you're meant to be. So, as I come to the end of my presentation, I want to leave you with this thought. My books are not just about Alex and I, they're about what it means to live a life filled with love, laughter, and yes, a little bit of chaos. They're about finding humour in the everyday misadventures, embracing the bumps in the road, and in the end, loving the journey. Whether you pick up one of my books to relive your own memories of Greece, or to laugh at our misadventures, or to find a little inspiration and a love story that stood the test of time, I hope you find something that resonates with you. I think by now most of you have realised how much Alex has shaped my life. Without her, I would never have written a single word. Every one of my books revolves around our life together, and the experiences we've shared, and the ways in which she has transformed me. Alex is the ultimate ambassador for Greece, running 2 Facebook groups and spreading the beauty of our culture to over 40,000 members across the world. Some of her posts receive over 1 million views. But me, being a foreigner, writing about her beloved Greece is a delicate task. Every time I sit down to write, I can feel the breath on the back of my neck, watching closely as I type, casting a sharp eye over the script, ensuring I don't wander too far into some imagined version of Greek life. She agreed to let me write these books on one condition: they had to be an accurate account of our lives, and trust me, they are. And I've got the scars to prove it. We've left behind the pain of long distance, being apart for months on end. Now we wake up together every day, sharing our lives between Greece and England, embracing our multicultural marriage, and this time the distance no longer separates us. No matter where we are, we're together. Since Alex and I became a couple, my world has expanded in ways I never imagined. The beauty of Greek culture, the stunning landscapes, and the warm, welcoming people who made me feel at home the moment I arrived. These are things I felt compelled to share. Because, after all, it's not enough to simply be happy. You have to share that happiness with others. Plato said it best: every heart sings a song, incomplete until another heart whispers back. So thank you for whispering back. Hellenic.
Well, have we got time to ask each other questions, or do we go straight to the audience? What do you think? Yeah? Do you go to the audience?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Mind if I still use that then?
We've got plenty to talk about, so if the audience doesn't want to say no, we'll just come back. You know, we'll bore you some more. It's fine.
If you have a question, please just stick a hand up and I'll come by with the microphone.
Hello, my name is Alexander Skinas, Barber. I'd like to ask Peter Barber, how are you feeling after the speech?
I probably won't do it again.
Because you look quite sort of flat. You
Yes,
did very
yes.
well.
Yes,
You did very
yes.
well. Thank you very much. And all of you did amazing. Thank you. That's
Question. Yeah.
Hi. Do you think there's something distinctive about Greece as a place to write about? Do you think it generates different kinds of travel writing from other places, other parts of Southern Europe?
I do. Do you?
I love Patrick Lee Furball.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether I love his writing or I love the place he writes about.
Okay. Shall I go first?
Yeah.
Sure. So, I mean, every country obviously, you know, has, you know, British and American writers come to it with expectations and so on. And for me, looking at the history of travel writing about Greece over many, you know, looking at that over many decades, there's of course this tension to things that I've written about before, which is that obviously in the immediate post-war period, there's lots of writers coming to Greece with a heavy classical education. And so they come with expectations, and that's not just that they're going to find ancient Greece in the present in terms of monuments and remains, is that they hope to find the modern Greeks reflecting what they expect the ancient Greeks to be like. Okay? Which is why you get certain obsessions, which I'm not saying are not true or are true, I'm just observing that, for example, they find that the Greeks are highly political because they want to think that, because also due to education as well, for some writers, Athens is Greece, and Athens equals democracy, and therefore they want to find, they're looking for that. But the trouble is, of course, there's this other tension, which is that quite a lot of writers in the post-war period don't find the Greeks live up to their expectations, right? And so they don't find the Greeks to be the heirs of the past that they hope for, okay? And of course that justifies some writers being quite condescending in terms of, because at a government level there's British intervention because the Greeks can't sort out their own affairs, allegedly, But some writers in the sort of 40s, 50s and 60s sort of seem to do that as well, because they think of the Greeks as children in terms of their cultural products, which gives British justification to saying that the British writers are the heirs of the ancient Greeks, actually, not the Greeks themselves. That's how the writers are coming at it. So you've got this tension of, we would like to find the ancient Greeks there, but we don't find them, so the British are going to be the heirs of the Greeks instead, So yeah, but you can do that with, there are people here who know this, but you can do that with any country, can't you? Because we come with baggage, whatever country we write about. So, and of course, I'm doing massive generalising about people having a classical education, but to be honest, that it's a moot point when in travel writing about Greece that evidently starts to fade. I mean, you can because obviously when I was being educated in sort of late 70s and 80s, I definitely wasn't receiving a classical education, So when does that fade in terms of where that's coming from? Yeah. Anyone want to answer that question? Or? No. Any more questions?
Yes, I've got a couple hands in the back. Let me just wait my way. Do you and then work my way up.
Hi, thanks for your talks. So you're talking about classical Greece and then modern Greece, but I wondered what you thought about Byzantium as the bridge between the two. The great Patrick Verma was as interested, if not more, in Byzantium than classical Greece, and he saw, as a bridge, a form of continuity between the ancients and the moderns. There was a lot of discovery of important sites in the 20s, the British School of Athens uncovering mosaics and so on, and there's sort of rediscovery of this period. I wonder how that figured in your sort of idea of the British travel writers, or just travel writing in Greece in general.
Yeah. I think that in say the period of say the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever you want to pick up, there were literally hundreds of people, not writing guidebooks, but writing proper travel books like Lee Fermer did that you're referring to. And so this is all going to be a massive generalisation. But quite a lot of people were not as interested in Byzantium as he was. I mean, it was at that time, there were some people who definitely focused on it, but it's still the forgotten thing that people don't go to Greece for, or write books, or write travel logs about it. So you are correct to identify him as, but he is fairly unusual. Yeah.
There's also Robert Byron.
Yeah.
If I may add a little footnote to what brings people to Greece, I was actually quite surprised to see Charles Schermerhorn, who doesn't come from a classical education, being interested in St. Paul in Greece. So he associates Thessaloniki with St. Paul being chased from there, and he is hugely interested in Veria, where St. Paul took refuge after being chased out of Thessaloniki. To me that was like, oh, I had kind of forgotten that could bring people to certain places as well, instead of just the antiquities. But sure enough, Charles fits in that kind of, the modern version of an older American missionary tradition. He'd spent some years in seminary, and so you could see that this there's quite a lot of interest that draw people to Greece, even if they weren't immediately on our radar, or if we had forgotten about the whereabouts of St. Paul entering Thessaloniki and then fleeing it as quickly as he should.
Professor Van Steen, maybe I missed it, but can you just confirm, we can buy this
Yes.
document?
The book is now available, but as these things go, it's way too expensive in hardcover. If you wait a few months, it will be available in paperback and much more affordable. We don't set the price of our books, unfortunately, but a few more months and it will be available in paperback. And I'm one of these, I still like to actually hold the book. I'm not one for Kindle or so, but yes, it is available.
Fantastic. And to Dr. Wills, I was intrigued you mentioned Kevin Andrews. I met him actually during the dark years, so to speak. Where does he rate? You don't often hear people talking about him these days.
Sorry, say that last bit again.
I was wondering how you rate him. I mean, he wrote this long poem called The Flight of Icarus, and he wrote some travel books, but he's not normally on the list that people mention.
Well, in brief, his A Flight of Icarus is a fascinating book, as I'm sure you know. And what I would recommend that people do, just to leave it in the air, is to read both editions.
Is there a Greek edition?
No, but there's two English editions, and they're very different from each other. And and it's not just in terms of style, in terms of sentences chopped or amalgamated or whatever. It's in terms of how he represents the experiences he went through in revisiting those places. So there's kind of like off the top of my head, there's it's a 1950 something like that, isn't it? The first one, but it comes out again in the 1980s, not long before he died in paperback. It's well accessible in something like Penguin, something like that. And if one looks at both of these things, I think he has to reconsider some of the things that people said to him about the resistance and about the Civil War. And I'll just leave it at that. Yeah.
Perfect. We have another one just here.
Hello. Being slightly greedy, possibly two questions, but you can take a pick really. So one is to ask about the advantages of travel writing, and the other is to ask about the disadvantages of travel writing. So in terms of advantages, just wondering about the extent to which travel writers have contributed to the corpus, the body of knowledge that we have about Greece in the 1940s and 50s, corners of Greece that might have been disappeared from our knowledge and we would know nothing about, no writing, no photographs, because that wasn't happening there, but from travellers passing through. I don't know. Maybe there were other people writing it. I just don't know. So to what extent did travel writers contribute to the record that we currently have? And the disadvantage, you touched on it earlier, that's really about the risk that comes about writing about beautiful places, that then you kill the golden goose, that people start travelling there and it changes, and we certainly see that in Greece. You have a Greek government at the moment that wants to expand the tourist industry, both in terms of months and maybe numbers of people, but then you have popular uprisings and challenges against the damage that can come with over-tourism. So to what extent do you think travel writing contributes to that, or to what extent do you think travel writers feel that tension and possibly guilt?
Do you feel the burden of responsibility? Not popularising or popularising? Peter?
Or me?
Yeah. Is the burden of responsibility hang heavy on you?
It's a very difficult question. I write from a different perspective. I write about Greece from inside a Greek family. Most travel writers are people that have visited the country, that love the country, they feel the atmosphere, and they write from outside. My experience came from within a Greek family. In my experience, the Greek people will welcome tourists. We have this tremendous love of foreigners, the love of people. I haven't experienced any protests personally. I haven't experienced anyone telling me that they wish there were less or tourists are small in Greece. But from where I live in a place called Pefki, which is northern Evia, which is still very rural. So I don't really see the mass tourism. I don't really see the nightclubs. I see tradition. I see the traditional Greek village. So I think it's in some islands. I mean, a couple of weeks ago we drove around eastern Greece and we visited a place called Lefkada, an island of Lefkada. Now I think it was the west side was rugged, beautiful mountains, and we absolutely loved it. And as we drove around to the east side, it would become very, very touristy. And I felt uncomfortable, and that's the first time I felt uncomfortable in Greece. It lost the spirit. So there's a paradox here that we would love to see the traditional Greece, but the more we talk about it, the more we write about it, the more we're going to lose it. But I don't know which way we're going to go. So.
Gonda, did you have any thoughts about documentary value of Charles's memoir for the period he was there?
I'm very much attracted by archival research, and in fact I've kind of made the total switch from starting out as a person trained in classics to a person who has modern Greek and Byzantine Greek on our radar, and more so modern Greek. I'm very much attracted by the sense that you can still find the untrodden path in writing about modern Greece. I don't find that same comfort in writing about classical Greece, where I feel there's a sense of it's been done. Whereas with modern Greece, I can still find real discoveries, such as an archive and 300 historical pictures from villages in a box in San Francisco. And you sometimes I think, I was so lucky. Yes, I'm lucky, but I'm also on the lookout. It's not just sheer luck. And I just have a keen desire for other things to come my way, similar things to come my way, and I know that they're not going to come from ancient Greece, but there is still hope that an important source for modern Greece can come from a totally unexpected corner. It blows my mind that something so unique, really about village Greece, northern mountain village Greece, sits in a box in San Francisco, about to be thrown out.
I mean, I'm going to be deliberately awkward about the last questions because, I'm not denying there is documentary value in lots of these memoirs and stuff, but I always like to overlay that with the fact that people are coming with cultural and political views, and your Charles was definitely no exception.
Oh,
if people would like to read your book, they'll find out a lot more about his political views and what he thought about the local Greeks that he came across. But to be honest, the point that I would really like to say is that it isn't just in modern times that people have been saying that things are that tourism is and I don't want to. It's not my island, so I'm not trying to provoke anybody who comes from or knows Mykonos and things like that, where people are talking about tourism. Don't want to belittle that at all. It's not my island. But I would say that people have been complaining about over-tourism in Greece, not just in the last couple of decades or in the post-war period, but probably for about 100 years. I'm exaggerating a bit, but there's always people. Some British people have the luxury of going there and saying that about something is over touristic. I find claims about that in travel writing somewhat doesn't quite sit with me. Anyway, as I'm a tourist myself, then
And there are still so many unspoiled parts of Greece where you're all by yourself and you're the only foreigner who stands out like a sore thumb like I do in places. And then the surprise when you can actually speak the language and they engage. To me, there's nothing better, really. You don't have to be on Santorini or
like this tourist stands out in the picture, you know, as a tourist, yeah. So,
Thank you.
Just a quick question.
Are we sure that the mass tourism in Greece comes from travel writing or from hotels and travel industry advertising?
Yeah.
So
I don't think the academics contribute much to mass tourism. I doubt it.
and movies and novels and everything, yeah.
Did I get the impression that just now that travel writing is about an idealized version of Greece, while talking about rural, original, villagey, things that we all love, of course. We do love isolation, we love to leave the big city and go, and you kind of all mentioned that. But is it about that, or is it about some other references you made where actually it's about the chaos, about the real life, about how a contemporary modern country like Greece is, which combines it all in a way?
I must say, Schermerhorn puts the emphasis on the challenges coming out of the war, poverty, destruction. The roads are unusual, food cannot be delivered, people, local dissent that continues to boil over. It's about a lot of problems, but it's also about him being wanting to learn from the experience. Yes, he tries to kind of bring an American rationale, like there must be a way we could do this and solve this, right? Can be done, right? And then slowly acknowledging that with so much history and so much context, problems are not so easily fixed, and you have to go with a different kind of flow. And being willing to learn that, and being willing to share the discomforts for these 5 critical years with a wife and 2 small children, and a 3rd one born in Greece. This is an adventure on a whole different level.
But this is the story I've told before, it's not my story. But the thing is, if you go to a country like Greece and you don't really understand it, you can find things that you want to find. For example, I forget which anthropologist it is, and I forget which town it is as well. But I thought it was very exciting that there were these donkeys going around town, you know, selling things to people, and thought that this was, a way of life that was about to disappear. In this particular town, it was a way of life that only just started, because the fact that donkeys were being brought into town to bring deliveries from the countryside was because the town had increasing affluence. So it wasn't rural Greece that was about to disappear, it was a new Greece, which was exciting because the townspeople had enough disposable income for the donkeys to come to town and sell them things. Before that, the town was so poor that there was nothing. So, but it was read into that as being, this is disappearing Greece, that is going to, how old-fashioned this is. It wasn't old-fashioned, it was a latest thing. So you find what you may misunderstand, some writers may misunderstand what they're actually witnessing. So.
And David touches on something very important, that the 1960s, 70s anthropological studies always went to remote communities, villages, and have kind of perhaps helped us think of the traditional village, have shaped it in our mind, whereas clearly Greece has long moved on, right? I mean, the village life that hovers a little bit, sometimes a little bit too much, over travel literature and anthropological literature. It's about time that spell be broken, yeah.
And a very quick one, if I'm allowed, sorry, then we'll pass on. You were speaking about travel writers in Greece from the 1940s to today. So what is happening today? And do you think the occasional, the very frequent Facebook post from everyone who travels and can share something is actually diffusing the purpose?
We shouldn't underestimate social media, and we shouldn't underestimate Netflix. Maestro brings hordes of people. All of a sudden everybody knows about Paxi. Whatever, I mean, honestly, you could have thrown out the word Paxi 10 years ago and nobody would have been able to put it on a map. Now everyone knows. Captain Cornelis mandolin, Kefalonia, these people have images, again, of islands and rather traditional communities. And you see a kind of surge of interest associated with the visual images that have gone out through Hollywood-like venues.
Perfect. I think we're going to have one final closing question just here.
Hi, thank you so much. My question was that you sort of touched on, and I found it really interesting. Obviously, historically, a lot of Europeans and like white men have been able to go to countries and go to Africa and write about this and bring it back. And it was just interesting. I wanted to know how much influence or engagement you have with your writing or travel writers in general with, looking at natives, the writing of natives on their country, and about Greece, and as from written from a Greek, if it would be different if Alex wrote the book, it's just interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting concept that we go out and the British people go out and write about the natives of countries and the quaintness, if you like. In my opinion, that's almost devaluing the people of that country. I went to Greece with a completely open mind, and I actually found something better than I had before. I was born in England, I grew up in England. I didn't go to Greece until I was in my 35s, when Alex and I got back together. So my mind was clear. I didn't. Sorry, I've lost the thread of the question. Say that again.
Oh, local people, right? Just like the even in academic and travel literature, from the perspectives of if you engage with all of you, engage with the natives while writing, or if there are any, Greek academics or Greek travel, obviously they wouldn't be writing about traveling, it would be their travels, but it would be about their home. That's interesting to me.
Yes.
Historically, we have Tertius writing about, going to.
That's it. So I don't think I can actually call myself a travel writer as such. I'm more of a writer that writes about my country, which I've adopted. So I have a tremendous bias with Greece and with Greek people. So perhaps I should pass over to
Well, all I will say is that I'm immensely pleased to say that the academics who are writing about travel writing, setting aside earlier stuff, 18th and 19th centuries, which I like to set aside for the time being, so everybody talks about that. But of the 20th century stuff are more or less equally split between people like me who are looking from this way, and Greek writers who are writing in English. So if you are investigating that, and I don't think we're in disagreement. I broadly agree with them, and they would broadly agree with me. So yeah, so I think that we're all analysing Greece on the same page. So yeah. Yeah, there's some really fantastic Greek, academics and scholars, and some of it's very good and very accessible in English. So, do check it out. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I know there were some other hands out there, so I'm very sorry to cut it short a little bit, but just to make sure that everyone can get out of here on time. The bar will be open now until 9, so do feel free to join us over there, and our speakers will be around for a little while to answer some more questions. If you're interested in what we do here at the Hellenic Center, please do leave your email on our reception. We'll add you to our mailing list. And also check us out on Instagram at Hellenic Center. If you do any posts, feel free to tag us. And finally, a big thank you to Gonda